Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Addict's Advocate. There was so much good information out there in this world about addiction, about understanding it and getting help and removing shame and guilt about it. I had obviously a preconceived notions about what inpatient was going to be like. That I tell you, when I got into it, it was completely night and day difference than what I thought. And I think that that's a big thing, right? People have a stigma about, I can't go and do that because then I'll be associated with people that have track marks on their arms and are talking to themselves. And, it's greater than that. And there's a lot of empathy. There's a lot of love in the sober community that are just trying to make sure that everybody's, watching themselves and staying away as best they can, understanding themselves better in the process of their addiction, all those things. And I think that's all positive. I like I always like to do is start this off with kind of just having my guest give a background on what was the addiction, how did you realize it, how did it manifest?
All right, I appreciate it, man. So when I think about back at my life, first of all, I don't fit the stereotype, right? I didn't come from any abuse or a broken family, or I wasn't molested. And I don't demean any of that. This is just my experience. I know some people have very horrible childhoods. I had a pretty decent childhood. I come from a pretty decent home. My grandparents are from Spain. My parents were born in Puerto Rico. I was born in New York City. I guess that makes me Puerto Rican. And but very rock solid, typical Latino family. My dad worked his ass off to support the four of us. I have three older brothers. My mom was, and a little bit about my dad. My dad was a very typical, proud Latino man. Never really showed us any affection. Never really coddled us. Didn't hug us. Didn't kiss us. Never said, "I love you." That's just the way he was. He had a presence about him that commanded respect. He didn't even have to say anything. It was just his presence that we knew not to mess around with Dad. My mom was the complete opposite. She's a very loving, nurturing, passionate woman. She nurtures us. She loved us. So I got the best of both worlds. I got a lot of tough love from my dad, and I got a lot of nurturing love from my mom. There was four of us. My mom had three boys back to back. My brothers were about 18 months apart. Boom, boom, boom. She had three boys. 10 years later, she wants a girl, and this is her last attempt at a girl, and she was convinced I was a girl. She had a girl's name picked. She had a girl's baby shower. She didn't want to get an ultrasound because she knew that she was going to have a girl. And on January 11th, 1971, a boy came out. So I was a disappointment from the start. And my brothers like to joke around and say, "Well, Mom, you came close." I was, I might have well been an older child. My oldest brother, I'm 12 years younger than my oldest and 10 years younger than the third one. So it was almost like I was an only child. I was spoiled rotten. I was king baby. I always got what I wanted. And, growing up with, we never went without. We weren't rich. We weren't poor. I would classify us as a working middle class family. My mom didn't work. So I guess my dad made pretty much, good money to pay for a house. We went to private school. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to the 10th grade. So it was good. I have a lot of good memories growing up in New York City. But, it was a trying time, New York City, in the late 70s to mid 80s. And when I look back at my life, was it some kind of traumatic event? Was I trying to escape some feelings? Was I, trying to get rid of some pain that, led me to drugs and alcohol? Not anything in particular. Looking back, I bought into what I like to call the original lie. The lie that told me I wasn't good enough, I wasn't hip enough, I wasn't cool enough, I wasn't slick enough, nobody liked me, I stuttered, so people made fun of me of that. I was inadequate, insecure. No one ever told me those things. Those are the things that my head told me, even from an early age, before drugs and alcohol even came into the picture. And I believe that, most kids probably go through that. They go through that insecure stage and all that. But I think as addicts and alcoholics, we seem to falter along the way. We never seem to outgrow the self-centeredness of a child, and something just popped up. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, man, I was on a roll. Apologize. It's like headphone thing popped up or something. All right. There.
You're fine.
Perfect.
No, you're fine. I got the power of
So
editing.
yeah,
I
I
get it
just
all.
never seemed to outgrow that, and if I can pinpoint what it was that drove me to drugs and alcohol, the first time I got high wasn't because I was trying to escape some pain or whatever. Really, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Bottom line, if I can look back at it and pinpoint it, I used for the first time for acceptance, to fit in. All the kids were doing it, and I had a lot of this internal dialogue that was happening that told me I wasn't good enough, nobody liked me, and when I started using, that internal dialogue just like went away. All of a sudden I became cool and everybody wanted to hang out with me and all the girls liked me. So that's when I bought into the second biggest lie of my life, that somehow drugs and alcohol were the solution to that internal dialogue. And for a while, it worked. I found drugs and alcohol to be the solution to my problem being myself. But in the end, the bitch turned on me. It was no longer a solution. My solution became my problem. And from that first time I used, this was mid 80s New York City. And if you know anything about the drug culture, what was happening, a specific drug became very popular in the mid 80s. And by the time I was 16 years old, I was, strung out on crack cocaine. And I was just, I try not to get specific with drugs, but, there's something about that. It's a horrible drug. It is absolutely horrible. The joke I like to say is, I smoked crack cocaine once for 15 years. and it just led me down this deep rabbit hole. And I was a smart kid. I was doing good in school. My parents put me through private school, and the twisted thinking of the addict. I think most kids, normal kids, they're in school and they, look forward to like graduating and going to college and buying a house and getting married and starting a business and having kids. And I think that's normal thinking for most kids. But my twisted thinking, that didn't look appealing to me at all. What was appealing to me was, hanging out with the drug dealers, being hip, slick, and cool, cutting school, that looked appealing. And that was just the twisted thinking that I had at a very early time in my life. And that kind of thinking just led me down a deep, deep, deep dark hole. And, I pretty much dropped out of school. I was running, at 16 years old when I was thinking, I was a kid, associating with drug dealers and murderers and gang members and that lifestyle at the age of 16 years old led to a very traumatic time in my life where I got, long story short, on the streets of New York City, this lost soul of a human being pulled out a 38 and shot me 4 times in my chest at the age of 16 years old as a direct result of drug addiction and drugs. And they weren't flesh wounds. I was, mortally wounded. My heart, my lung, my stomach, my intestines, my stomach. And by all rights, I should be dead. But I'm here, I'm not. And I believe, call it the higher power, call it God, call it the universe, call it whatever you want. I believe I didn't die that day for a specific reason. And part of that reason is for what's happening right here, right now. To share that experience, to share that story, to let the suffering addict know that you don't need to die from the horrors of addiction. You don't have to end up like I almost ended up, dead on the streets of New York City. And you think that would have opened my mind, that would have opened my eyes. That would have, that was a pretty traumatic experience. I was, in surgery for 14 and a half hours. I flatlined about halfway through the surgery. I was pronounced clinically dead for 32 seconds, but they revived me. And for years it was about me. Look what happened to me. They almost killed me. My pain. And I use that almost like as a badge of honor. And you just don't understand what I went through, and was totally self-centered in that process. But being a parent today, I could only imagine what my poor parents went through, waiting in the lobby of a hospital for 14 and a half hours, not knowing if their little boy was. And my mom told me when the doctor came out and said, he's going to have a long recovery, but, he's going to make it. My mom told me she hit her knees and kissed that doctor's hands. And I believe surgeons are doing God's work. Because if I take you home and cut you up the way they cut me up, your ass is going to die. But, I got bullet holes, I have scars, and, and I'm a firm believer that scars are there to remind us the reality of our past. And if I ever forget where I came from, all I have to do is, take my shirt off and look in the mirror and see what drugs and alcohol almost did to me. And, so that wasn't what it took. You'd think that's what it would have took, but I just had to dig that hole deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. My parents thought that New York City was the problem. We'll get George out of New York and he'll be okay. So a year to the day later, we moved from the Bronx to Deltona, Florida. And if you don't know what that is, that's like moving from Metropolis to Smallville. I went a complete culture shock. I went from, skyscrapers and subways and graffiti to, gravelled roads and cows and pink houses and fences but I don't care if you take an addict or an alcoholic and put them in the middle of the desert, they're going to find ways and means to get more. And that's what I did. I just, dig that hole, kept digging that hole, and got to a point, let's say, January 2001, I had this idea. I had this thought. I knew there was a problem. It was evident there was a problem. I could not live in denial no more. Everybody knew me, knew I had a problem. My parents tried to intervene. So I came up with a great idea. I just thought it was one specific stuff. It wasn't all the other stuff. Because I was pretty much a garbage head. I went through every phase there was, anything from alcohol to Zoloft and everything in between. It was, A to Z. And I went through different periods. And by the end of my addiction, I became that addict that I swore to God I would never be. I became a IV, heroin addict. And when you get to that point and the physical addiction that comes to it, there's a few drugs that are physically addiction, alcohol being one of them, opiates being one of them, benzos being another one, where, it wasn't even about getting high no more. It was about, if I don't use, I'm going to be physically sick. And it was the fear of withdrawal that just kept me using. And it was brutal, and it was complete insanity, and just was like, enough was enough. What I thought, if I just stopped shooting heroin, I'd be all right. It wasn't all the other stuff. So I went to a methadone detox program. They weaned me off heroin. They weaned me off the methadone, and I got out of that place, and I continued to drink, and I continued to smoke pot, continue to take pills, and a certain chain of events happened. And during that period, this is when I became like really aware of of how empty I was inside. It was like no matter how much I smoked or drank or pills I popped, it just didn't seem like there was enough. We all, for those of us in 12-step recovery and those of us in recovery have probably heard, there came to a point where the drugs and alcohol just stopped working. They just stopped. And that's where I was. It's like, for a while they were my solution, but in the end, it became my problem. And certain series of events happened, and I just got to the point. To be perfectly honest, I had absolutely no desire to get clean, none whatsoever. The universe had a different plan, right? And this is the short of the story was. This was the catalyst. This was like the breaking point. I was living at my mom's and dad's house. And thank God I had two great, enabling, loving parents, because when shit got really bad on the street, I would have been that homeless drug addict. I jumped from house to house. Technically I was homeless, but I always had a roof over my head because I always leeched off somebody until they got sick of my ass and they kicked me out. And when I had all my options were burnt to the ground, I always ran home to mom and dad. And and what it was, my brother came over the house. He fell asleep. I had this bright idea. My addiction said, take his wallet, take his keys, steal his car, go on a run. So I did it. And it's just crazy how driven, because that's not me by nature, and I think that was like one of the greatest conflicts towards the end of my addiction, was like this internal conflict, call it like a spiritual warfare or whatever you want, the little devil and the little angel on your shoulder. Like, that wasn't what I was brought up with. I was brought up, to be responsible, to be honest, to have integrity, and it, drugs and alcohol literally turned me to a monster. And when I became aware of that, it was painful, because that's not who I was. And I think that's the greatest pain towards the end of my addiction, was knowing there was a problem, knowing I wanted to stop. And no matter how honest I was with that intention, I just could not stop. I mean, there were times in my addiction where, and probably a lot of people can identify with this, is waking up and telling myself and believing wholeheartedly that I am not going to use today. I am not going to use today, and only to use within a couple hours later. And that's where I was. And so I stole my brother's car. I went on a run. I maxed out his credit cards. It was just complete insanity and divine intervention, I like to call it. I'm leaving the neighborhood in Orlando, Florida, and a drug dealer in the corner waves me down. I pull over. He says, yo, I need to go re-up. I don't have a car. Let me borrow your car for a couple hours. I'll break you off a little bit now. When I come back, I'll break you off some more. Sound like a damn good idea to me, Dusty. I trusted this man. 2 hours turned to 4 hours, 4 hours turned to 6 hours, 6 hours turned to 8 hours. I still don't know where the fuck that car is to this day. But that was the catalyst. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I had to make that phone call, ask for help, called my brother to come pick me up. And this is where addiction took me. No guilt, no shame, no remorse. I get back to the house. My brother's pissed off. My dad is angry. My mom is crying. And I'm like, what's the problem? It's just the car. You can get another car. You got money. They were absolutely pissed. My mom was crying. And I got real concerned when my dad said, I'm calling your probation officer. I was like, wow, violation of probation. That's Grand Theft Auto. They're going to piss test me. I'm going to fail. I'm going to go to jail. And in desperation, when I think about it, it's just, out of the side of my neck, I didn't even know where this came from, but out of the side of my neck, I was like, Pop, please don't call the probation officer. I'll go get help. Take me to the hospital. I'll go get help. I don't even know where that came from. And they bought it. And my dad bought it. And he didn't call the probation officer. They took me to the hospital. I walk into, my brother took me to the hospital. I walk into the emergency room, and I don't even know what I'm doing or saying. And again, I go up to the nurse, and out of the side of my neck comes, "Nurse, I'm on a lot of drugs. If you don't help me, I'm going to kill myself." She said, "Okay, have a seat." So I sat down. My brother left. The nurse went to the back, and everything in my body, soul, and spirit wanted to run. I wanted to run far and fast, but for whatever reason, I just, for the first time in a long time, I was scared what was going to happen if I left. I cried suicide, so they put me under a Baker Act. Long story short, I made it to a mental health facility. Then I made it to a detox facility. And mind you, I had no desire to get clean. I was going to just buy some time. And I stood and I sat in that detox room, and the more I got to thinking, and all the lies, all the rationalization, all the justification I used to justify where I stood as a result of my drug use just stopped working. I could no longer avoid the truth. What we call that moment of clarity. And I was smacked in the face with the moment of clarity, and it was no longer about buying time. Out of nowhere, just like, I got to do something different. And that was how my recovery started, was just like in that detox room with that moment of clarity, and, and the addict's prayer, help me. Didn't know what I was praying to, but just help me. Please help me. And March 9th, 2001. And I've been clean since. And I, went to treatment, and I did that whole thing. And here I am all these years later. It seems like a really long time, but at the same time, it doesn't. I don't know. It's just weird. A lot has happened. Life has definitely showed up. I have done a lot. I literally came from nothing and was able to build this great life that I have. So it's amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah. You brought up some good points. It's interesting because, I was the same way. I didn't have really, a traumatic, I lost some family members and things like that growing up as a kid. I went to Catholic high school as well. And life was good. But this whole notion of acceptance, inadequacy, it's interesting because you're not the first one to touch base on this acceptance, this feeling of inadequacy. And that's, if we can figure out a way to address those that are struggling with that, right? I mean, because kids are trying to find their place in the world. They're trying to feel, part of the group. And it's such a, they're so permeable in these ages, right? That, a seemingly innocent decision for acceptance and ends up, taking hold of your life and giving you 20 years worth of grief. And you're like, whoa, I didn't look for that. The whole notion of, not understanding me, I can feel that. I can appreciate that. This wanting to stop but couldn't. I was the same way. I mean, I got to a point where I had to concede. I ran out of options, and I was like, okay, well, whatever I'm doing is not working anymore. So I need somebody else to kind of take a hold of me and tell me what I need to do. What are some of the triggers now that do you feel that you were unaware of, but still kind of maybe give you a little bit of grief?
Really, really long time since I've been triggered to like want to be, want to use. I've had emotional triggers that, trigger anger or sadness, but the thought of like going back to where I came from, going back to using again, it's been a really, really long time. It was kind of uncomfortable early on. I would have thoughts of using on any given day, and I'm in 12-step recovery. That's where I found my recovery. I know it's not the only way, and people find different ways to recover, and I'm totally okay with that. Whatever works for you works for you. My experience is 12-step, And when I would have thoughts of using, um, and what I'll say about real quick about, different roads to recovery, whether it's 12 step, whether it's Christian based, where it's therapy based, or it's peer support based, where it's clinically based, whatever it looks like, all those things I believe have one thing in common, and that's support. You need some kind of support. That's been my experience. So wherever you find it, you have to find some support. And and early on, I really attached myself to as much support as I can get. And I would have those thoughts every now and then of using, and I would talk to my sponsor. I'm like, man, I thought about using today. And he was like, well, George, did you think about using, or did you feel like using? For me, there's a big difference. The thought usually triggers the feeling. But it's been years since I felt like using. I'll have the occasional thought that triggers, some silly thing will trigger it. And not too long ago, I was watching TV, and a Fireball whiskey commercial came on the TV, and it has a very specific taste. Tastes like a Fireball. It tastes like candy. And I was watching that, and literally my mouth started watering, and I actually tasted it. Like, holy fuck! And did it trigger the thought to go drink right now? No, but it did trigger that it was kind of like a remember when. We have this muscle memory that because drugs and alcohol, whether you want to look at it that way or not, it's traumatic. Living a life of addiction leaves those traumatic scars, and they're still there. So sometimes a little thing can trigger it every now and then. But as for the thought to relapse and go back to a using, haven't had that in really, really long.
It's nice. It's interesting that you brought that up, because there are instances apparently that because our primal brain is cataloged our addiction so strong that certain triggers can in fact bring up a physical response. Purely bring up a physical response, but also even more so, what's crazy is that can give you withdrawal symptoms even without having used. They say that a lot of people sometimes, the next day, they'll be cranky, they'll be irritable, just because they're almost experiencing a detox symptom.
Literally, you said, it will trigger a thought. And when you think of anxiety and panic attacks, which is happening in your head, however, it triggers a physical response. Yeah, it's just crazy how the mind works.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I recognized that I had some mental health issues to deal with, prior to getting completely sober. And I went through different routes to try to, find that happy place, and nothing ever seemed to work. And unfortunately, that's a slippery slope, working with psychiatrists, working with psychologists, because they still, for a lot of, these medicines that do help, someone from a mental health perspective, not so much detoxing medicines, which work great usually, but just, the managing of mental health is that it's a hit and miss. And they still don't know exactly all the reasons as to why the medicines do what they do. So they start kind of, it's like throwing darts at a wall and hoping something sticks.
Since that shooting, I had, extreme trauma. I got PTSD issues. They've gotten better over time. But early on was very extremely hyper vigilant and paranoid. And I found out the hard way that, crack cocaine and PTSD is not a good combination. It's the absolute fucking worst. Talking about extremely paranoid and extremely ultra hyper vigilant and but I found ways to self medicate. I found opiates to be the best. It became my medicine. It really quieted that inner thought, and yeah, it's just crazy. And even with 23 years clean, I'd like to say that, I haven't dealt with my PTSD issues in a really long time, and I haven't, but lately, for whatever reason, probably starting since last year, I've been having, really bad flashback dreams. And I think a lot of it had to stem from my mom, unexpectedly passing away in 2021. And anyway, I want to talk about getting through probably the saddest day of any mama's boy's life. Losing my hero, the woman that never gave up on me. And I didn't even think I was capable of feeling such grief and such loss, and felt like, my heart was ripped out. And I went through the could have, would have, should have, I should have told her more. I should have been there more. But even throughout that whole thing, drinking and drugging never sounded like a good idea. Just being able to feel today, good, bad, or indifferent, is one of the gifts of recovery, because there was a time in my life where I didn't feel anything. So I'm a firm believer you can get to
It was just
anything clean if you have the support that you need, and the venue to grieve and talk about it and communicate about it. I believe anyone can get to any situation without drinking or drugging.
With it being so long in your sobriety, what do you find that are, I mean, because I'm assuming it was really fresh when you were first starting sobriety. What did you do initially?
I went to detox, and I went to treatment, and I was in treatment for 45 days. And I'm a big component for treatment. And it's not the ultimate solution, but it's a great way to freaking start. You can't stay in treatment forever. Eventually you're gonna have to get out in the world. But from my experience, it was a great way to start, because it gave me structure. My life was complete chaos. I didn't have a house to live in, or I didn't have a job. I was just complete insanity day in and day out. So going into the treatment environment, it gave me structure. I started, sleeping on a regular basis. I started showering on a regular basis. I started eating 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I got up at a certain time. We had to go to groups at a certain time. We ate lunch at a certain time. We had dinner at a certain time. Made my bed every morning. And doing that for 45 days straight, it gave me structure. And even some of those things that I learned in treatment 23 years ago, I'm still doing today. Like I'm a component, like, make your bed, make your bed. You'll be surprised how that little thing can go a long, long way. I could have a shitty day at work. Everything that I can possibly went wrong. But when I come home, I know my bed is made. And I can find some gratitude in that. And so just those little things, and getting back to the support thing, finding support, finding, like-minded people. I'm a firm believer that shared experience goes a long way. Finding those people that have been there, done that, and know the way out. And the thing we talked about earlier, that need to be accepted, to fit in, which can be looked at as a defect of character, but you can also use that to your benefit. So I wanted to fit in, I wanted to be a part of. So that same notion that led me to using, led me early on in my recovery, because I wanted to be part of recovery. I wanted to, hang out with, people who had a lot of clean time and were going out to eat and going to the movies. So I really hung on to those people, and being able to communicate, and being able to, just have structure back in my life, and continue to go to therapy after treatment. I was doing aftercare treatment, and I started going to meetings, and I really implemented myself within the 12-step community here and in Daytona Beach, and And, some people really, struggle with the whole 12-step concept. And, I understand it's not for everybody, but for me, what it boiled down to me was really just the people, you know, finding some good people. And I found those people in 12 step. And look, there's assholes everywhere. There's assholes in church. There's assholes in the PTA. There's assholes in school. There's assholes at work. There's assholes in AA and NA and whatever A. But you just find good people. And that's what I did. I've had relationships and friendships in my life today, for the past 23 years that I've known these guys in my life that support me no matter what. And, your circle doesn't have to be huge. I know a lot of people. I speak all over the country. I speak in different parts of the world. I know a lot of people. But when it comes to my core support group, there's probably about 5 guys that I know got my back no matter fucking what. And so that was very, very useful and very vital, is to find your support, find your people, find your tribe, find people that understand, find people that when you talk to, when you have those crazy ass thoughts, that you tell a normal person, they're like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? But you would tell somebody like us and they get it. They understand. Like, yeah, I get it. I understand. And I think that's a vital component to recovery, whether it's 12 step, or whatever, finding people that understand.
Yeah, it's interesting. You had said that when we're younger, right, we're trying to fight for this acceptance and this and being adequate, right, in our tribe in elementary school, junior high, high school, and we're trying to fight for this love and this belongingness, and right,
Yeah.
right. But I agree with you. It's the community.
Part of my motivation today, why do I continue to go to 1 or 2 meetings a week, is to give back, really, to like be there. I have some time, I have some experience, I have some strength, I have some hope. So my motivation for going today is to help the guy with 1 day clean that's walking through the door. That's my motivation today. It's not like because I'm afraid I'm going to use. No, I heard this TikTok not too long ago. A guy was going on a rant about, oh, people go to 12 step because they're like afraid, like, get on with your life. You don't have to go to meetings somewhere. I understand that notion, but that's not my motivation. My motivation today is like, I have gone on with my life. I have built my life. But if I choose to go to 1 meeting a week to help out the guy that's walking through the door, and that's the way I serve and give back, pay it forward. And I do that in my profession. I work in the treatment field. I speak at conferences all over the country to just give back, to pay it forward. And it's part of the reasons why this thing works, is helping others. There's notion that people that, we're brainwashed, that it's a cult, that, we continue to go to meetings for the rest of our lives because we're afraid we're going to use, or no, it's definitely not that. For me, it's like, again, like I said earlier, it's about the people and the relationships and helping others, and that's how I do it, staying connected with that community, is very vital to me. And I've expanded on that. I work in the treatment field. I'm a peer support specialist, and I have to understand, even though, I am 12-step based, like I said earlier, I know it's not the only way. So, I have to encourage people to find their way, find whatever works for them. And who am I to judge what's working for them? If you found it that way and you're staying clean and you're helping others, and better yet, enriching your life and then changing and being an asset to the community, because, we can get clean and sober, and recovery is more than just, not drinking. It's like actively working on my issues being a better person, being a better employee, being a better productive member of society, being a better husband, being a better father. And that's takes work. I still, I recently went back to therapy, because, some PTSD issues and dreams. And so I'm a component of outside help. If you're in 12, and there's this big notion, some of you know, these old school 12-step guys, I like to consider myself, part of like the new generation of 12-step, but some of these old guys, man, they're like living back in 1935, man. That shit worked back then, but it's 2024, and who am I to judge anyone if they seek outside help or if they're on MATs or, that's not, I don't care what gets you clean. All that matters is what keeps you clean.
We shouldn't be living recovery white knuckling it, because we're doing it wrong at that point. Something's not right. And I do agree with you. What was interesting was that when I came into my detox and I saw the 12 steps for the first time, with being, with my own faith, it was interesting because I found like some things just resonating from my Catholicism in the 12 steps. And I know that at different points of my life, through humbling experiences, that I've felt like I've done some of these 12 steps unknowingly, right? Not anything addiction related, but just I'm just trying to be a better person, you know? But I do think that it is a wider net now, right? With what we understand with the chemical imbalances,
Exactly. Get it.
mental health, all these things that, yeah, whatever it takes. I mean, get outside help. Don't be ashamed of it. The strong seek help, the weak don't. So be strong. But yeah, I agree with you. I think, unfortunately, with new people coming into recovery and trying to find something and wanting to, tip their toe in the water, if you will, right? So they're like, maybe I'll go hide out and sneak into an AA meeting somewhere, right, and sit in the back. I think the problem is that you get a certain perspective sometimes at some of these meetings that may not jive with the newcomer. And so they sit there and they go, this doesn't work for me. I'm not going to go back. They don't try a different meeting. They don't try a different time of day. And that's because, again, it's a scary endeavor anyway for the addict to sit there and be going, okay, nobody's really knowing what's going on in my life, but I need to go get help. So I'm going to try to do this by myself.
People, whichever way we can, to find what works for them. It's not cookie cutter approach. What works for me might not work for you, might not work for the next guy. It can, but it doesn't mean will. Time and time again, the road to relapse, I hear that it's very similar. I stopped going to therapy. I stopped taking my meds. I stopped telling the truth. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped helping people. You stop doing the things that were working, and then you relapse, and then you wonder, how the hell did I get here? Well, because you stopped doing the things that were working. So I'm a firm believer, with 23 years, I still do what I need to do. And communication is vital, being honest with my support, being honest with my therapist, being honest with my sponsor, being honest with my wife, just being honest when I'm not feeling good or if I'm off. And that's where support comes in, which is very important too, because sometimes I don't have the ability to be honest, because I got ego and pride, and I don't want to tell people that, I'm suffering and I'm really got some intrusive thoughts, or I just don't feel right. But if you have people in your life that know you enough and know when you're off, to be like, hey man, what's going on? You just don't seem like yourself. And when I get approached by people like that, and it's important to, even with years clean, to have the ability to ask for help. Just because I have all these years clean doesn't mean that sometimes I'm going to suffer. And recently, over the past, since, my mom's death, I've been dealing with a lot of, internal issues. Got some marriage issues going on right now, but I think that's an ongoing part of marriage, it seems. But I don't know. We're always working on something. So yeah, just not doing the things that work, I believe, is a huge component to going back to relapse.
I mean, recovery is tedious. I mean, this is a lifelong, tedious event, and I know that the outsiders looking in to us, those that have supported us in our addiction and helping us get better, et cetera, they've been through a lot, right? So the last thing that we want to do is sit there and go, hey, yeah, we dropped the ball, we've relapsed, because again, we have our own shame and guilt associated with that. But we also have this fear of just letting someone down that we know we've put through the ringer with. And that's, so that ends up becoming, why we'll just keep it quiet. We won't tell anybody about it. We'll just try to keep it on the under and hide it. And then you just perpetuate that guilt and the shame with that. And I think a lot of this is going back to, again, I mean, people that support someone suffering an addiction have to have a lot of empathy. They have to have patience. And unfortunately, unless you have someone in your life who understands what what addiction is, it can be a lot of frustration. A lot of people don't understand me. And so yeah, I'm big now about trying to make sure that, because I have it even in my family. I mean, I've got addiction in my family, but my mother was someone who like witnessed it in her life with her parents, and yet she doesn't understand the things that I'm going through. And so it's kind of, there's a little bit of irony there. Because she made the decision when she was younger that she wasn't going to be like that. She saw the destructiveness of her childhood, and so it was just, for her, it was purely a decision.
Really understand it until you're like part of it, or have gone through it, or a family member, and see the pain and destruction that I caused my poor family. And that's why they call it a family disease, a family whatever, because the individual doesn't only suffer, the entire family suffers. And and I never really understood the pain that I put my parents through until it happened to me. When I watched my daughter, go down the rabbit hole of addiction, like, was probably one of the most difficult times of my recovery. And I saw it happening, as an addict, I spotted it a mile a fucking way. And it wasn't like she was just, going to the club and like drinking and smoking pot. She used like me, and it was heartbreaking. And it was, when I talk about new levels of powerlessness that have nothing to do with drugs, and no matter what I had to do, no matter what I did to try to intervene, and the same things my parents did with me, and to witness my own child go down that road was completely heartbreaking and frustrating, powerless, and I couldn't do it. And so going through that experience, I was like, wow, now I get it. Now I really get it. Now I know what my poor parents went through. But on the flip side of that, the pendulum swings both ways. My mom and my dad, in his own way, because my dad is, just stern, were completely in joy when I finally got clean, and I started prospering my life. It brought so much joy to my family's life. And then when my daughter finally got clean, my daughter's in recovery too. She's 10 years clean now. So I got to experience the pendulum of complete utter despair to complete utter joy. And if you have someone in your life that's struggling, and it's heartbreaking, because there's nothing really you can do. You can try to intervene, you can try to motivate, but ultimately it's going to be up to that individual. There's things that we can do to help motivate that person, but sadly, a lot of us don't get clean. A lot of us, especially nowadays, a lot of us die. And the thought of that happening to my daughter was just heartbreaking. But she's clean today. She's living her best life, and it was just a joy to watch. And now I have, and I had my daughter at a very, very young age. I was 19. She was a surprise. It wasn't like I was trying to have a baby, but had no business being a father at 19 years old. But there I was, not minding my business yet again. But I dragged that poor girl through the horrors of my addiction, and she has her daddy issues because of it. But now I'm making my living amends towards her. I'm being there for her for all the times that I wasn't there, but now I have an opportunity to like break the chain. I have a 4-year-old son now, and he never has to see what my daughter saw, and hopefully he never will. And I truly believe I continue doing what I've been doing over the past 23 years. He'll never see me with a beer in my hand or a needle in my arm or a straw up my nose, and that's great motivation to. And one of the gifts of recovery is being present today, being present in my life, being present in my children's life, being present in my wife's life, being present. For a long time, I was on auto drive. That's just crazy how I went from that to this. And sadly, a lot of us don't make it. That's why I'm passionate about helping people to let them know, you don't have to live like that no more, man. My heart breaks for people that are just stuck and feel like there's no way out, and suicide and overdose and complete just mental breakdown. It's happening time and time again, and that gives me the motivation to like continue to do this thing.
It's awesome, man. You brought up something interesting, because like I said, this has been heavy on my mind ever since I got clean. If I'm witnessing someone that I love that's going through addiction and I've never been through it, how would I love that person? How do I love that person if I have no idea what they're? To me, it's a simple fix. It's a just stop. Just stop, and you're gonna be fine. How do I love that person if I don't understand what they're going through? And even more so, right? Having experienced addiction myself, how do I love someone that's going through addiction? Because, yeah, we know that in addiction we're illogical, right? We're not rational. We're making a lot of stupid decisions. We know that there's the psychology of change, right, that needs to take place inside of their own minds in order to get them to the point where they go, "Hey, I need help." How do you keep nudging them in the right direction?
I'm a kind of like, black and white kind of person. And, some people, I'm a firm believer that different strokes for different folks. Some people need to be coddled and they need a little sugar coating, and some people just need to be told the fucking truth. And sometimes you just have to find what is going to reach that person. Try different ways. Try the tough love. Try to sugarcoat it. Try whatever it takes, because and not giving up. But sometimes we have to love them from a distance too. So sometimes we just have to give them enough rope to just destroy their lives. Because for me personally, no matter how hard my parents intervene, and I can see that same situation with me and my daughter, no matter how hard I try to intervene, no matter how much I try to not let go, it just seemed the harder I tried it, the deeper she went. Till I got to the point where, not that I had to completely let go, I just had to change my tactics. I just had to come from more of a place of love. Again, you're gonna find your way. With my daughter, the tough love, tell her the fucking truth thing, that didn't work. Sugarcoating it and coddling her, that didn't work either. It seemed like it was like a combination of both. So sometimes she needed a good swift kick in the ass, and sometimes she just needed to be hugged. And not until she was ready, and just letting her know that I'm here. I'm here. If you need help, I'm here. And she says it a lot, and she says, I probably wouldn't be clean if it wasn't for you, Dad. So and I didn't never give up. So I think it's hard to do sometimes. It's easy to do with our immediate family, but it's harder to do with, people outside our media. And it's incredibly frustrating when you work in treatment too, because, and I can say this about working in treatment, it's not for everyone. Some people, they have this notion, like they get all excited, like, all right, I'm clean, I'm gonna go work in treatment and help people, and they have a certain like idea on how it is, and they get there, and it's not physically demanding work whatsoever. It can be emotionally and mentally and spiritually taxing. Um, and a lot of people just don't cut it. I believe it takes a certain kind of individual to make it in that field, and I love it. It's just part of a way. And even if the person, and that's another incredibly stressful thing when you work in treatment. You see the turnaround. You see how many like don't make it. And it can be like, like it's, and sometimes I'll even question myself, man, like, what am I doing here? Out of the 20 guys that just graduated recently, maybe one of them is still clean and sober. But I have to remember, I just can't give up. If all that work helped one person stay clean and sober, it was well worth it. So just
Yeah, I know. I feel like when we're in our addiction, we're definitely more emotionally unregulated. And when we are sober, we definitely have learned to put up healthy boundaries. We've learned to maybe process things that are difficult just so that they don't weigh as heavy on us for a longer period of time. I'd heard in my treatment and my detox, I heard somebody say something, someone who was going through it, that was so profound to me. She had said, I'd recognized that I was transferring my pain to the people that I loved. So my addiction, my active display of my addiction and my using and everything, and the pain that I was feeling, I was basically it was just manifesting then in all those around me that I loved. And then, and they're trying to help me. And that's when you realize that addiction is selfish. It's self-preservation. It's our own self-medication. But then on the flip side, recovery is very much a selfish event, but a positive selfishness, self-care. It's establishing, how you want your life to look. But
that's been good.
this has been great. I think I've gone through just about everything that I was interested in talking to you about. I appreciate your candidness. Things I didn't know about you.
Yeah.
And they say that God doesn't give us anything we can't handle, but sometimes you sit there and you go, you know what? I think that was enough. Right? Yeah. The story of
Yeah.
the violent act imposed upon you and your recovery is
And I
something
recently,
absolutely amazing. That's
to reflect on, when I think about how many times I would been given a second chance, again, call it God, call it the universe, call it higher power, call it whatever, call it divine intervention or serendipity or whatever. Those things, those trying moments, that trauma, that the lifetime of addiction, made me who I am. And in some kind of weird Twilight Zone kind of way, my life today only became possible because of all that. And not until we get to the other side, you're like, oh, wow. Like, so was it well worth it? Did that all have to happen? Was it predestined? I don't know, but that's the way it happened. And I believe, that's where gratitude plays a huge component in my recovery. Because if you're truly grateful for being clean and sober, the last thing you're going to do is go back to drinking and drugging. The last thing you're going to do is go back to the very thing that destroyed your life to begin with. So I try to live every day with a grateful heart. And part of the way I do that is, I've been told that gratitude is action. I can feel grateful all I want, but, am I doing it? Am I acting grateful? And that's why, I continue to be of service, and a big thing in my life. And, I have, the experience of, I don't know how it happened. I came in very vocal and I got a big mouth. I don't know, it's the Latino in me or whatever. I was very active in sharing my story, and in doing so, I got recognized, and now I'm like speaking at conventions all over the country. Next weekend, I'll be in Reno, and it's just amazing that I get to serve on that level. I had the opportunity to speak at the World Convention in front of 20,000 people. It's just amazing that my life has gone in that direction to be, to have purpose and to give back. Because for so long, I just took. So it's a great opportunity, and whatever venue you find to do that, like what you're doing here, I think is great. You found a way to give back, to be of service, to get the message of recovery out there, to potentially help people, is what this thing is all about when it comes down to it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think, there's somebody out there that goes, hey, that sounds just like me. And it makes sense to me. And I get it now. I finally get, what's going on inside. One final thing I wanted to say is that, it's interesting because this whole year of first was very much, it was like at the end of a relationship, right? I mean, when you quit doing those things, right, you're basically, you're leaving something in your life that provided you a false sense of comfort. But it was a known remedy. It was something you trusted to an extent. And so when you go through this whole first year, it's almost like experiencing the death of someone and then experiencing that year first without it. It's a difficult thing to do.
Like, it's bad for you. It's causing nothing but pain, discomfort. You want to get out of it, but for some reason you just can't leave it.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of what ends up happening is that I think when you get to the point of recognizing that this doesn't work anymore, it's now I've got to go through the process of, okay, how do I separate myself from it? I'm aware, and that can be dangerous. Because there's, it's usually, it's breakup sex with the drug of choice, I guess. I don't know, but it could be fiery, and it could be, it could be devastating consequences, because you just know that your life's going to look different. At least it should be looking different once you're out of rehab. But George, this has been great.
If you're new and you come across this podcast, and I like to say to you, just whatever you're going through, you don't have to go through alone. You don't have to suffer in silence. There's so many resources. Find the help you need, find what works for you. And it is possible. It is possible to live a life beyond drugs and alcohol. And for a while, I was that guy. I didn't think there was life beyond this. That was like one of the big things was like, what am I going to do now? Right? Like, what am I going to do for fun now? Like, I was having fun to begin with. Like, it started off as fun. I'm not going to lie. When I was a kid and a teen, it was great. But if it was still fun at the end, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. In the end, it was a complete burden on my life and everyone's life around me. So it is possible, man. You can find a way out. If you go to my TikTok, you'll find some serious recovery stuff. And sometimes I just like to just have fun. I think a great tool in recovery is just being able to learn to laugh today. When you can find laughter and things that used to cause you so much pain, I believe it doesn't hold power over you no more. And I believe laughter is a great tool. The ability to like laugh today and enjoy life without the use of drugs and alcohol is like amazing. I didn't think it was possible, but I can honestly say the best times of my life have been over the past 23 years, good, bad, and different. Not every day is going to be butterflies and rainbows. Life still shows up. It's just life. But some of the greatest joys and some of the greatest excitement, some of the greatest pain and loss and whatever has been over the past 23 years. And it's okay to feel bad. It's okay to feel. I think sometimes we convince ourselves that it's somehow wrong to feel bad. There's no good or bad in it. When bad stuff happens, It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. It's what I do with that stuff is what really matters. Because we all get angry. We all going to get frustrated. We're all going to do this. So being able to live life today, man, is just great.
I think that's it. I think it's the fear of what we're going to do with that emotion, right? I think that's the thing that's I know that I've experienced that. I was actually thinking about it the other day. It's kind of interesting that you brought it up because, yeah, we're afraid to feel. I appreciate your time. You have yourself a great day.